Agenda, things I'm going to just step through for this session is chat briefly about the defaults, the kind of the way people search behaves by default in SharePoint. Then I'm going to get straight really into the nitty-gritty of what we want from a staff directory search, which is generally wildcard. You know, I want to type in part of a name and get the rest, basically, which is the bit that the standard people search is not the world's strongest at. We'll talk about user properties. Those of you that are, you're pretty experienced with SharePoint, I would expect most of this to be just reaffirming what you already know, but others in the room, you may not be altogether familiar with some of the different terminology, because it's all worded very, very similar and it's got subtle differences. I'll talk about the alternate search box that I use and show you how to set it up if you want to, but with all the caveats and health disclaimers that come with it, because it is a piece of JavaScript. I will stress at this point, this is still an IW track. You haven't strayed into the dev track. I am not a developer at all. In fact, I didn't even write the bit of code I'm going to show you. I've got somebody else to do it for me. But I'm just going to purely step through what it does, because you don't have to implement it that way. It's to reiterate, really, the use of the wildcard searching. Then just chat through the search results page, because it's a simple thing, but people often ask questions, well, how do I set up a new page? And when I query, is it going to the wrong page? So we'll just touch through those. And chat about the refiners too, the fact that you can also configure those to pull out additional properties, and at which point I may have to pray to the demo gods, because they have not been kind on the refiners front. So I say it's mostly going to be a bit of show and tell and talk. Do please, by all means, interrupt as you go along. How's that resolution doing? It's a bit disgusting. I'm just going to see what happens. Let me just resize you. I'm trying to check there's nothing dodgy on my desktop in the background. Let me just, oh God, now you see what everything else I've got installed on here. This looks terrible, quite frankly. See, I think this is going to be the worst idea, but I think it'll make it easier for you to see close-ups without me putting a magnifier on. Let's see what that does. Well, I may be scrolling a lot, but you'd be able to see more, I think, there, wouldn't you? Let's see, let's resize you. Or is Vim just going to be clever? Okay, let's see how bad that is. Okay, I may have to do extensive additional scrolling here, but I think, is that easier for you to actually see what goes on in the boxes? And that's really what the session's about. Okay, it is a little bit skewing. It looks skew on my screen too, so the projector's not playing friendly, but search site. You install SharePoint, hopefully. You also create a search site. That, I suppose, I could have put as the first. Slightly idiotic, I have to say, change with SharePoint with this release is that if you set up your very first site collection in SharePoint, it doesn't come with a search site pre-set up for you. You kind of have to go and create it. So you get search this site, which does what it says on the tin, and then you create your search center and configure it. But I'm assuming, and shout please if I'm incorrect, that you've gone through that step. You've set up your search site, you've got full searching of all sites and scopes, and you have a site like this. You can nod, yeah, shake. Brilliant. No, it's the last session. We're going to get some interaction out of everyone today. Great. So that's all this is. And this is complete vanilla site. There's no rocket science going on here. I've already set it to the People tab to just start talking you through some of the defaults. So if I type in a search for green, I get a result frighteningly quick. Please, that may not be indicative of the rest of the demo. That was quicker than that's probably because I was there a minute ago. So I get one response. If I was looking for Carol Green, that's fabulous. But it's an exact match. There might be other greens, there might be other spellings, and that's the first gotcha, particularly as we're outside of the US. My demo at the moment, I had a bit of a demo part failure in the week, so I've had to roll back 3 versions, and I don't have phonetic search working on this because it doesn't come working out of the box when you first install. You have to tweak to get it up and running. And that's because phonetic searching is language specific. So if you install and let your servers all think they're in America so that you're on US language settings, you'll have phonetic searching working from the start. If you're outside of the US, we could have a conversation at this point about, Independence Day, and there's a wider world than the US. Apologies, any Americans there. But yeah, if you install non-US, including UK English, code 44, phonetic search isn't working, and it's the way it literally installs. There is a hotfix, and I've got it on the slide, so don't worry too much about it, but I haven't actually reactivated it on this. So if I had phonetic searching, it would actually pick up that I've got another green in there that ends in an E, because phonetically that's close enough. So phonetic search gets you around part of it. But I'm just going to show you something. If I just go in here and type in last name Green, I get my 2 results. So now I've got my green here. If I go up there, take it down to GR, I get a whole bunch more. And obviously it's going to look a bit skewy because I've taken the res right down. And that's because with SharePoint, standard searches, they're not wildcard enabled for good reason. You'd get so many results back if you had wildcard searching on your general sort of subject searches. What wouldn't get returned in an alphabet if you start with part of a word? And that's quite normal for an internal sort of enterprise search solution. But actually wildcard searching is exactly what you want if you're creating a staff directory, because then you can just type in as much of the name as you want and then narrow down. I've got 7 results, or, actually you can spot I use green a lot to explain this concept. I get all the other variations. I have not enabled anything differently on this SharePoint. It's vanilla SharePoint. I didn't have to go and tweak anything in the background to enable wildcard searches. The difference is I've done a managed property search. Instead of just typing in a free word, this last name colon is saying look for this managed property. And when you do a managed property search, you'll get wildcard capability. If you've ever clicked on the advanced search, and hang on, let me just go across. So you can see here with your advanced search, you get this option of all on, the exact, any, none of. This enables you to use all the different parameters in the background. It's just the basic search is the basic search, and it tries to get you what you're looking for. Now, when it's a demo, and this is literally a self-build demo, it's not a Contoso or a Microsoft virtual machine, so there's not a lot of data here. But once you get to a large data set, wildcard would never, ever work for a subject matter expertise. Can you imagine typing in SH? My name's Sharon. Bane of my life, quite frankly, with SharePoint. On the one hand, it makes it quite an easy thing, SharePoint Sharon. On the other hand, every conversation, you can't help. You tend to react to your name, which, at a SharePoint conference means I start to look slightly paranoid by the second day because everyone's saying shh. But, you can't type in SH. What are you going to get back? You're going to get loads. So it's the simplest of tricks. That's all the staff directory is. It's manage properties, enable that wildcard capability, and now you start to get all the different results, and we get the refiners and so forth in the background. Now, I'm just going to flip over to the slides. Is everyone familiar with the concept of managed properties and their difference to crawled properties? Is anybody not familiar? Okay, we're going to get a few hands, so bear with me, those of you that are more experienced, because it's always worth the clarification. So there we go, the defaults. I might as well cover off a couple of slides. I've already mentioned default behaviour, you're looking for subject expertise and social connections. And that's where you get these people work with you, that your colleagues know them, and everyone else. It's all around try and make a connection to subject matter. But for contact details, your only options are an exact or phonetic match, unless you're aware of how to do the wildcard. And I've just mentioned briefly, they're not working as the phonetics, but there's an answer to that. So wildcard, just about that. Manage properties. There's 2 phrases that you hear a lot, and it doesn't help that the terminology changes from each version in SharePoint. A crawled property is anything that's discovered during the indexing process. And so the indexing process is the protocol handler, or connector as it's called these days, connects to a data source. It kind of understands, you're a documentum, I understand how you organise your content and that some of the properties will be in the document, but you'll also have properties outside the document. Every one of those sort of effectively columns it discovers, that's a crawled property, and it understands the different stores and how they organise them. So a file share, you don't get a lot, but you would get, for example, date modified. Everything you can see in your file server, they're potentially crawled properties, and they all go into the index. They're all used for the various voodoo magic that goes on with determining relevance ranking. And anything that's a crawled property can become a managed property. You can map crawled properties to managed properties. Now, why wouldn't we just have them all as managed properties? Fantastic question. The reality is, an awful lot of those crawled properties are either similar or duplicates, because different systems use different terminologies. So you might be indexing a CRM system, and that might say account name, where they put the customer. You might also be indexing a SharePoint site where they have the column called customer name, and another SharePoint site, in all likelihood, where it's called company, but actually that is the customer name. They would be 3 different crawled properties. With the managed property, you can map all 3 into one managed property. So now I can search on customer, or I can, whatever I choose to call it. Let's say we call it customer, and it now knows that, well, if it's returning results from this site, then the account name is what we're looking for, the customer name here, the company there, but it's the customer. So that's the managed property. So you can map all these different, effectively same meaning, crawled properties from different systems into one managed property. And then it's the managed property that you're able to use in searches and in configuring search results pages. So if I just jump back over, wow, I'm going to get a 15-minute warning here off Big Ben by the sounds of it. So when I do this search, last name is managed property. That's all there is to it. I can search on any managed property here. So if we went department, you can see here I've got a finance department, I've got a product development department. So if we just change that out into department, just say F, and there we go. We go straight to finance. So it's just to show you it's the same thing, it's just wildcard searching. To go into the background, let's show you where you can actually configure those properties. Ignore the red warning light, that's the air bit of running SharePoint. So, managed properties, they're all part of the search service application. So if we click in, we get into our search interface. And if we scroll down, it's going on slightly low res. Oh, I'm slightly off screen. If you can see here, and this is where the terminology changes, because here we're calling it metadata properties. And is anybody here running 2007? We've got everything I'm showing you also applies to 2007, except for the search refiners. But this bit here is equally applied. The difference is you would see managed properties here. They renamed the UI to metadata properties. I think a little confusing because it was easy to explain to people what they were getting into this screen. So let's walk through it, into the metadata properties, because now, lo and behold, we get new managed property. We will not discuss consistency or lack of in SharePoint's user interface. And then we can see we've got our crawled properties. Let's just show you what it looks like. If I go for a new managed property, bound to have done test 1, 2, 3 before. Let's do test 888. I can give it a description, so what I'm going to be mapping. Very specifically, they have to share the same type. You can't mix and match. So you couldn't have a managed property that maps to a date field in one system and a text field in another. And that's important because, some people might be typing dates, but actually the field's created in a text format. So it does have to align. So we'll keep this as a text format. And you can say here we've got include values from all crawled properties to be mapped, include values from a single crawled property. If we go add mapping, there's another cute use of this. It's a way of seeing visually all your crawled properties. Oh my God, you will get to oodles of them as SharePoint's deployed. So you can see here we've got a whole bunch starting. We've got some basic properties coming through. We've got some Office properties. If we just start scrolling through, we've got loads with Office 12. That's nice. Don't expect to understand what half the properties are. We do have some categories, which helps you jump straight in quite usefully. If I actually filter down to SharePoint, we get everything starting OWS. If you create columns in SharePoint, they will start with OWS _. So it's a nice little hack. If you're looking to map a property for a column you've created in a site somewhere, this is where they will start. So just filter by SharePoint, and then it's kind of alphabetically, it will go through. The other thing, crawled properties are only there once they've been indexed. The classic gotcha, if you're setting all this up in one go, is to go to your SharePoint site, create your columns, fabulous, and then you want those columns to become managed properties, and then you come here. There won't be anything there yet. A couple have come across this one. It's a great little mind freeze when you're doing a rapid deployment. Even though you've created the columns in the library, they do not exist as crawled properties until they're indexed. Only at the index point do they then get into here. Oh dear, we've got something glowing in the background. So that's a simple gotcha. If you just very quickly created your column and then jumped straight to this step, go run your index and then it'll get listed automatically. And you can see on the categories, we've got all the people properties here. So here we can start to look through and I can say, well, I'm going to actually map in my people office. And I can keep going. This is why it's the concept. I can map as many different crawled properties as I want into a managed property. Once I've got that managed property, I can then use it. I'm just going to cancel out from there. One will do. because the other bit's important too. I've got a couple of final settings. This one at the top here, used in scopes. Everyone familiar with what scopes are in SharePoint? Yeah. Anybody, it's easy to do the reverse these days. Anybody not familiar with what scopes do in SharePoint? Okay, we've got a couple. This is a quick and easy answer. A scope is just a way of reducing the result set before you search. It's actually less valuable in this version of SharePoint because in this version of SharePoint, there's a lot of emphasis on search refiners, the concept of start with a very broad search and then narrow your results down based on what you're looking for. I'm looking for type PowerPoint, or I'm looking for a certain author, or I'm looking by this, but get the results set first. There's some sense there because if you say create a scope that says, right, only show me results from this particular team site, quite easy to do, and it might be a big site, it might be your records management repository. So I'm looking for an archived document or a managed document. I'm going to set the scope to only return results there. A lot of people do that thinking it'll speed things up, and it doesn't, because the scope is only applied after the search has been completed. You type in your query, SharePoint goes in the background, gets a massive result set back, and then goes, okay, you selected a scope. Let's chuck away 3/4 of the results. So there's no performance gain from scopes. It's just results trimming before they're first presented to you, as opposed to search refiners, which lets you trim the results once you've got them. But that's all a scope is. So it's trying to improve the odds of getting the thing you're looking for on that first page as opposed to 15, 20, 50, 100 pages down the result set. So no major big deal with it. And we've got a couple of additional settings here. But with your managed property, if you want to use it in a scope, you do need to check the box. And that's another classic gotcha. Set your managed property up, go to do the scope, and you can't find the property to be used. So you just say, allow it. I'm going to cancel out of that because it was just really to help explain what they were. But whilst we're in the background here, I'm going to go across to the user profile service. Who here has got the user profile service working with SharePoint 2010? Who nearly lost hair trying to get it working with SharePoint? We can kill Microsoft for that one. The user profile service, or the profile service as was in 2007, completely rewritten for this version of SharePoint. I mean, literally architecturally from the sky. I'm not going to go into the messy guts and disglory of it all, but you can safely say there were some bugs in the user profile service on SHIP. I think the official advice on Microsoft's website at the moment is to be at least up to the June 2011 cumulative update in order to be able to restore your My Sites. So I'm hoping Bob Fox will cover that in his session over on My Sites. Up until there, you lose them when you put the service pack on, which is quite painful. Okay, so here we are in the user profile service, and here we've got manage user properties. So we can manage our user properties if we just go into that screen. Slowly, thought I was doing well. Let's go and see what's going on in the background. Oh, get away. Watch the little button whirl. Hey, thank you. Okay, so hopefully you can see them. I'll have to scroll down quite a lot. You get a whole bunch of user properties. You can obviously import properties from other sources. This is generally a good thing. Your Active Directory will have the login account, will have the email address, may have most of the contact details. How many people have got an identity management solution in place, a full identity management solution? Ooh, very good, very good. Who has no idea what an identity management solution is? Fair dose, fair enough. So the idea of identity management is that in most real-world organisations, now if you're in the Microsoft world, ideally, there'd be only one directory, and that would be Active Directory. But obviously in the real world, that's very different. Some systems will prescribe in and use the directory for login. Others will have their own authentication mechanisms. Most organisations will end up with several places where user identity is held, and HR will often own a lot of them. So the identity management is simply a case of saying, well, which of these directories owns which properties? So login, yeah, AD gets that one. You need a login account to get to SharePoint. You are royally stuffed without it. So that's a first starter, but it might be that HR owns job title and department, for example. It can happen. So you can import from multiple different sources. You can also export back out again quite easily. So if we just go in and edit the nearest property to hand. Just remember to do this before I start talking. Oh, not too bad. So here's a classic. We've got the mobile phone The equivalent AD reference would in fact be cell phone. But if we scroll right down to the bottom, at the moment there's no connection, but if I want, I can add a new mapping and pull this information across. I knew there was something not quite working with my user profile service. So imagine with me, if you would, this would be the connection to your Active Directory listed right here. And if you had identity management, you might actually have a series of different systems listed that hold the different properties. You can map to those systems, but also just as you have to pick the matching attribute. You won't see any without picking a connection. But this is the important bit too. You choose the direction. And a lot of people don't realise you can actually export back from SharePoint into said sources. So you can choose, if you want, to let the users maintain more and more of these properties themselves. Anybody here using the export function, exporting from SharePoint back to AD? Yeah, ooh, very good. Yeah, we've got some. Yeah, I'd say it's probably about 30% of the clients I work with currently are brave enough to go down that path. I find it interesting. The main reason usually not to do it is consistency. It's not concerns about the health of AD or AD being hammered by people changing. It's well, people might use different job titles to the one that's the official record, and it's like, they do that on their email signatures anyway if they can get away with it. So, it depends how prescriptive the organisation wants to be in terms of managing that kind of information. So setting up exports is also quite easy too.
And those fields be controlled through the management data service?
Yes, that would be within the identity management solution, because because SharePoint itself doesn't hold any authentication information. It's just really either a consumer or a provider of that information. AD is the security principle. So if you can manage AD, in effect, you can manage SharePoint too. So you push through. But if you're going through the full managed metadirectory service, watch out on the MMS, because we've got the managed metadata service as well in SharePoint.
Specifically, if you wanted to allow users to export certain properties in their profile so that it would go back into AD, say their job title.
Yeah.
If you had them defined in the management data service, so you picked consistently the name, the titles, etc.
So you do the pick list out of there. Actually, I don't know. I've tended to do it through the term set these days through SharePoint. So they maintain the term set and they do the pick list. I haven't actually tried it. In all honesty, straight off the managed metadirectory. I haven't touched the old MMS now. I get the wrong MMSs mixed up. So I don't know, is the honest answer. In principle, it ought to. If not, the term set would be the alternative, because then you can do a controlled listing and make sure it maintains in sync. I'm curious, because you seem quite advanced. Have you done a point direct to the management side, the managed metadata? Yeah, so you do the relationship there. That, to me, would be the more common sense solution, and performance-wise, it's going to work better within SharePoint. Okay, so again, just cancelling out of here. The other thing as well is you can create your own properties. So if I go new property, it's not dissimilar to creating a new column. You give it a name, Twitter ID, Twitter badge. You can put your Twitter account in and then choose the type. And you can see there's lots of similarities to creating columns. So it's quite easy to add your own contact details into here as well. If there were any kind of contact information that it would be useful to capture, but there's never ever going to be any sane reason why you would want that in AD, put it in the profile. Why not? If you're an organisation that wants to go down the social media route, why wouldn't you encourage people to put their Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn profiles in? Why wouldn't you? Interestingly, a lot of clients come back with plenty of reasons why they wouldn't. And then it's like, well, are you going down the social media route or aren't you? But if you are, put your Twitter IDs in. Just pick single value, straight in, and then control, is it going to be a required or not? You're going to force people to fill it in. I think optional would be kinder. What's the default privacy setting going to be? So how visible? And you could start safe. If people are concerned about these contact details, mobile phone or home phone being obvious classics, start with only me, but allow the user to override. So if they want to share it with the whole organisation, let them, put that option in for them. You can choose whether or not you allow users to edit the value. So that means when they edit their profile, they'll be going in, and do not is pretty obvious. And you can control your display settings. So show into the user profiles page, show on edit, that would be quite useful anyway, and show updates in that news feed. So if somebody changes their contact details, it will show up in the news feed. So you can put all these on. And that's it. So I've created a new property. I could potentially go on to create a managed property for Twitter if I wanted. It wouldn't really make much sense because a filter by Twitter should get you one result. We shouldn't be sharing Twitter IDs. But again, if I go in at the moment, I won't be able to see it. I need some values in there. Somebody needs to populate that field. Then it needs to be indexed, at which point it becomes a crawled property. Then I can use it as a managed property. I should have put that caveat in, and sorry, I forgot. With crawled properties, it's not just a case it's got to be indexed. Somebody's got to populate at least one item with that column, with a value in that column. So you can't say just create your company name, run the index, and then there'll be the property there. It won't become a crawled property until there's at least one item in the index with a value in that column to justify it becoming a crawled property. So it's a bit of a gotcha when you're setting these things up. So simply create an item, populate the column, run the index, and it's a crawled property, and then you can turn it into a managed property. So if I just jump over to Administrator Profile and edit my profile, you have to excuse my dodgy persona IDs in places, and scroll down, so there's one, but I've finished. There we go. There's my Twitter badge. So you can see it's just rated, waiting for me to fill in. If you move quick, you'll have seen there was a second Twitter already up there, and it's defaulted to only to me, but I can choose to change it. So now I can fill this in. I might as well put my, remember I'm on, I'm going to share it with absolutely everyone. And if you remember when I created the property, I said also put it onto the display. Behave yourself, demo. Should not be getting a login prompt. Now, I get my title, I get my information technology, the department, location, and now I can see there's a little bit more information below. You don't get it visible by default. You can customize that, but there you go. I can also see the Twitter badge. So it's additional contact information if it's useful. If it's useful to get in touch with the right person, put it into the profile as a property. Really, really easy to do. You could potentially push that back into AD. Okay, let's go back to the search. Okay, so if I type in Twitter at the moment, I've not created a managed property, but you get the idea. If I just do my last name again, so this gives us that ability, and anything with a managed property, to do that wildcard searching. The challenge is that's really ugly, obviously, for the users. Nobody's going to be thinking I've got to type in the last name colon before if I want to get the wildcard searching. So if we go across to my staff directory page, that's where this little code hack comes in. And I stress that I'm going to show you the code as a sample. If you've got in-house developers, they may come up with a better solution, because all this is doing is saving the user the hassle of having to type in that managed property. So if I type in green up here, probably be better if I tried in something completely different that actually matches somebody. Let's do it with all the G's. So there you go. All I'm doing is not having to type in the last name with this bit of code. Now, to show you it on the slide, and then we'll show you how to set it up if you want to use it. Oh, wrong minimise. We'll code that. Here we go. So you're not expected to memorise this. There won't be a test or anything at the end, but it's just to show it can be done. And it's a caveat, sample. I use it on clients because it works. I have noticed it stopped working with the latest version of Firefox. That means I need to get a proper developer probably to write a better version of this. And it's like, I owe a huge debt to the person who I can't even remember who created it for me in the first place. It's a simple piece of JavaScript. I'm just going to talk you through it. I'm not a developer, so I apologise to any developers that would do a better job of this. But it's fairly basic. There's a couple of settings at the begin with which are just dev codey things that you need to do. So things like being able to pick up if somebody hits the enter key instead of clicking the search button. So it just does some escaping on that. We also do a mapping for characters that trip it up, like apostrophes, basically, in people's surnames, like O'Neill or O'Rourke, something with that. So we escape that out and replace it with the hex code. And then we've got a function, and here's the basics of it. So when we do this with people search, we're setting the variables of first name, last name, escaping out, this is all the waffly code bit, to the two managed properties. That's it. And I could add anything to here for any other managed property if I wanted. It just starts to get to be a long piece of code. And the last bit's easy. That's just the URL for the search results page. It really is a basic piece of code because it has to do if statements on every conceivable variable. So this could be written better. So the first one is if somebody only types something in the last name, which is what I've just been doing, then there we go, we've got our URL. So we're setting the URL variable. And there's the key bit here. Because there you go, that's the last name, %3a is the colon. So that all we're actually doing is writing the managed property and the colon name into the search query itself. It's as basic as that. We're just doing that part on the user beforehand. So then we point the URL and off you go. First name only does the same. Search on first and last. And you can see all it's doing is building up that search URL. So now we've got k equals, and you'll see that in your search results. That's your keyword, your query. Equals last name colon plus the variable for last name, so what the user types in that box, plus first name colon, first name variable. So it's a really, really, really basic piece of code. It's just taking away the need for the user to type it in. It means that, yes, if you've got a short list of departments, you can keep this going. You can actually add department into there, you can add the location, but it starts to get quite long because you have to carry every caveat, and this is a basic version, so it's blank, just the last name, just the first name, first and last, or it's just the department, department plus first, department plus last, department plus first plus last. So you can see it's a bit of an exponential on the ifs if you're not careful, but it's very, very, very simple. The third bit of the code is really basic. This just presents it. This just creates a nice, simple couple of boxes and a search button inside a web part. So we've got a table. I mean, where would SharePoint be without its tables? We're never going to get to fully divs. Yes, you could div this instead. And this just basically turns it into what I'm about to show you. So let's switch straight back. And I'm just going to put this page into edit mode. And show you this web part. This really, really complicated web part. If we actually scroll over to its pane, obviously I'm going to do a bit of scrolling here because we've taken the res right down. If you see up in the top right corner is the giveaway. It's a content editor web part. It literally is just putting a box on the page so we can put a little bit of JavaScript in the background to do that stuff that we showed you on the slide. So I'm just going to cancel. I don't actually change the web part properties at all. Just renamed it so it looks friendly. If I click inside, go up to our lovely ribbon and go into the HTML, it loves putting in spaces once you open it a few times. Keep scrolling, there we go. That's all it's doing. And I'm saying I must keep stressing this is just a sample version. If you have a developer team, they could write a better version, I don't doubt. But all it is doing is taking away the need for the user to type in the managed property and the colon so they can just type in a search. But by using those boxes, they get their wildcard search by default. Any questions at all at this stage? Okie dokes. Let me save that out. So just to show you it all from scratch, I'm just going to create a page for you to step through that setup. So if we're going to create a page, we need to go into the Pages library on the search site, because that's where all the search results pages are. And here you can see we've got a few different ones. I've got some internet ones because I've got a few federated searches that I've played around with over the years. So here, if we go into the ribbon, pet hate here is if I click add new item, it's obviously not going to, it's going to want me to upload. New document. And let me go back one because it's the first gotcha that people can stumble across. Let me just bring the arrow. This is the first thing. I hit the new document, I'm defaulting to a welcome page. If you were setting this up for yourselves, there is a blog post to walk through this, but I get a lot of questions on this, so we'll step through. There are 3 types of content type, by default, set up with the Pages library in the search site. This is all vanilla, not changed anything. You want the welcome page. Do not pick page, do not pick article page. All the search templates are as welcome pages. You might not feel much of a welcome with the search page, but welcome page is what they're grouped as. So here, if I'm just going to do ISC 2012 test, just so it's definitely unique. You can see here I've got 4 to pick from: advanced search, people search results, search box, search results. So I want a people search results page. Go away, log in. Oh, you horrible login. It looks to me like it's not picking up. Looks like me, it's ignoring all button clicks whatsoever. Let's do the good old refresh, because that always works when a demo is starting to misbehave. I may have two tests now. Let's just call it IS. Oops, SC London. That's better. Okie dokes, there we go. That's better. Let's go straight into the page. So we've got a straightforward page. Let's put it into edit mode. And, I'll need to scroll down a little bit. So we can see we've got our people search box, refinements panel, search statistics, action links, core results, bog standard people results page. It comes pre-configured with all the web parts ready and waiting to use. Whenever you create a new search page, just a word of caution, you'll get your search box, and conveniently, if you type anything in when you publish, it'll jump you straight back to the default page for the site. In fact, I'll show you. I think we've got enough time. So you can see up in the address bar, there's my ISC-London, so I'm on my current page. And if I type in green, I'm now on, can you see just at the top in the bar, I'm on the people results page. Simple little gotcha. It creates you the page with all these web parts, but you do still have to configure a little bit from the start if you want to stay on the page. So let me just click back, drop the page into edit mode, and show you a couple. So with the search box, if we were using it, we just edit the web part over to the right, and it's under miscellaneous. If you go straight down to the miscellaneous category, there you go. That's what gets you. The target search results page is pre-configured to pick up the people results, which is why it vanishes off somewhere else when you want your results on the same page if you're setting up your own search results. So here you instead keep it on the current page. It's as simple as that. Now we're actually going to replace that one anyway, so what we'll also do is hide it. And I'll leave it on the page, but I don't want it displayed. And then to show you how we put in that code in as nice simply, if we just go add a web part, it really is as cheesily crusty as a content editor web part. But here's the real gotcha. You can't add JavaScript onto a page in SharePoint because it will strip it out on save. And you can't even type it in here because it will strip it out on save. You have to go to HTML, edit HTML source, and drop the JavaScript code in there. Put the code in there, and it'll create the boxes. So let me just quickly skim out. Conveniently copied and pasted. Yeah, it's old habit. I just ought to, but I just still do my cursor select. Let's go back in. So you can see I'm going into the ribbon, edit HTML source, paste, dropping the code in there, click OK, and there we go, straight in. Publish as quick as you can. Most people, when they're trying to set this up, I then next also configure the title of the web part to replace content editor with staff directory, or more likely just hide it so it's not displayed on the page. But that's all there is to it. That's just purely putting those properties in. You have to do it into the source or it will strip out. And most people, if they're trying to set up some kind of simple solution like this, will say, oh, every time I click save, it's gone. And it's just, you've got to be very specific. It's got to go into that HTML source box, then save and publish to get it in the page. It's an annoyance with SharePoint, but it's the only way. Now, if I do a search on this, I know it's going to jump to the old page because I didn't actually update my URLs. So if we just do that, just to show. But there you go. Really easy, up and running. So it's a basic little feature, this. I really didn't think Steve would put a session on this at this conference because it's something that will work equally with 2007 as it will 2010. It actually works even with 2003 because it's that old. But it's a very, very basic way of getting a simple staff directory style search. If you kind of know that you spoke to somebody and you kind of think, well, was it Carol, was it Kate, was it, and you go beyond what phonetics will help you with, you can start with, well, we'll start with C, and if that doesn't work, we'll go to K. Oh, there she is. Obviously, the more people you've got, then the more letters you're going to need if you're going to get them onto that first results page, because you're going to have C's for all sorts. So it still helps to know as much of a name as possible, but it means you get round this issue that phonetics, whilst brilliant, if you kind of can say the whole name, they don't help you with part names unless those part names are nicknames. So it will find Mike to Michael, for example, but if somebody's got a completely different, if it's just they use a different nickname and you don't know what the name is, then unless that phonetic matches, you're absolutely toast. The last element I'm going to show you, now I can't show you all the way through, but I'll show you how to set it up, is the search refiners here, which are just coming off screen. You can see we've got job title down the side. Another popular request if you're doing a staff directory search would be to have things like department and location down this side, because they don't come up by default. They're not put down as a high enough priority. I'm just going to show you quite quickly how you go about setting that up. So I'm going to put this page back into edit mode. I'm going to edit the people refinement panel. And in the people refinement panel, it's under here. We've got this refinement section. You do not get the prettiest of user interface, it has to be said here with SharePoint, but it's here. Filter category definition defines what categories, and they're all managed properties are going to appear down that cluster on the left-hand side. So if I just bring this up, oops, let me just try and stretch this out a little bit. That's a bit better. I'm going to just space these out to make it easier to spot them. There you go. So I've just spaced these out, but you can see here we've got our view matches, which are the view matches, or we're off screen with the resolution. That's the first set. So do you want a profile match? Do you want a name match that you can refine by? Here we've got the job title, which is the one that we're seeing. So refine by job title. Here's where my demo sadly has failed me miserably during setup over the past week, because you should also be seeing department listed as a group. I've rolled back and I think I've got too small a data set now, so it's just not enough results to trigger the department displaying. It should be there. But literally all I've done is taken one category group, because that's the complete category, and then copy. I'm going to put plenty of space so we can see this. Paste. Oh, okay. It's not paste. There we go. I can't type correctly. And there are 3 settings. But again, and this is why I labelled the managed properties at the start, you have to have a managed property for this. But the settings are, you can change the title, for example, to location, description, use this filter, so this bit here, to a specific location. And then the third one is down here, the mapped property. So my map property in this case will be location. And that's it. That's how you add additional ones that you want to display down the left-hand side. It's actually pretty easy. And so you don't worry about thinking, I've got to write all this. It's more to show you that this stuff is not difficult to do. So even if it's not you personally that would go away and do this, you're not unreasonable by saying, can't we have a people results page where actually we've got a very well managed Active Directory, we've got good job titles, we've got everyone's departments, we've got locations, we want department and location filter, because actually those filters are very, very powerful to get you to the right person, and that person's location is separate to their subject matter. So if I just click OK, I'm sadly not going to see the fruits of my labour because SharePoint hates me today. I think I gave it too much of a hard time in the last session. Save and close that out. Watch the whirly circle. Hey, thank you. Publish. Let's just do a search to bring everybody back up. Grand. No, I lived in hope that it might have, seen the light on one last save. So that would literally add department and location down here. And it's one of the most common things I do for clients that just want something simple, because if they've got the clean data in AD, and it does depend on the health of a directory, they find that a really useful feature. You know, they're looking for the customer service lead and they need the lead in Manchester, so they can filter straight away by a specific location. That's contact information rather than what the default people search is all geared around doing. And for those of you not so familiar with scopes and refiners, this is the difference. What I could do, and I actually used to do in 2007, is for an organisation that had got a clean list of departments and it was well managed, I would actually add a department drop-down list here. So you could actually type in, particularly for a very large organisation, that was a way of getting the results set down. So type in as much of the name as you know, pick the department, I know they're in marketing, that's going to reduce your results set further. That's the scope before I get any results. You actually don't need to do that anymore if you add the refiners here, because it's the broader set, now refined down. Okay, let's get down to department. I know I'm looking for a marketing person in the UK, let's get down into location, and it can go deeper and deeper and deeper through those refiners to get you. So it can scale to quite a large organisation with a lot of people. Okay, 10 minutes to go. There is one last caveat. Oh, what I probably ought to show you too is that you can see we've got sort by name. The default sort order will set to social distance, which I haven't got much social distance to admin. Admin's God here. Changing to the sort order to name is another web part configuration. So let's, I daren't say quickly, because the minute I say quickly, I kill my demo usually. There we go. Now here's the gotcha, or at least I think it's a gotcha, let me check. So you can see here we've got the search action links up here, sort by name. So logic would be, let's go and edit that web part. And you can see we've got display sort options, allow users, lovely, display properties. You can say how many results per page, defaults to 10. This is very important while we're on here. Can you see as I've hovered over, the default results are 10. It's a bit of an internet standard. If you count on Bing and Google, everyone defaults to 10. Oh, the mouse hovers. Go on, let's just, there we go. Maximum is 50. That's really important. The most results you can return on a page is 50, and I'll come back to why that's a killer. So let's just carry on through. But if you look here, there's no way of actually changing the default sort order. It's because it's not on that web part, confusingly. It's actually on the core results web part. So if we go to this one, scroll up. Oh, I need to get my... Oh, I need to remember where I am. Let's go. Display. There we go. That's where you set it. It's, again, it's a simple little thing, but it causes a fair bit of head scratching because you kind of think it's going to be on the web part with the drop-down menu. It's not. If you want to change your default away from social distance to name, you actually change it on the core results. Slightly confusing. So we're defaulting on name. Let's leave it on that. Let's click OK. Save and close. Cancel would have been quicker. Let's publish that so I don't forget. Yes, go away. So there we go. So I'm going to look at doing my favourite green, do the search. And here's the thing. So we're sorting by name, but can you see the flaw in the search results? And some people may already be more than familiar with this. It's sorting by name, but the sort order is on the first name, not the last name. So you can see Carol's at the top, Ed, I've got all my Eds, my Edwards, Graham's down to Helen. But you can see Gray would come after Green. Would Green come after, yeah, Green would come after Greendale, but yep, Grail should be at the top because it's GRA, it comes before GRE. It's not a surname sort. I get asked a lot about this. It is a pet frustration. If you go down the fast route, you get more configuration options, so you can absolutely get around this. But the defaults, if you're on a SharePoint standard and you've got the basics, this is actually not that easy to fix. In 2007, and it's also equally true of 2010, there is a hack because this display here is just like the search refiners. I'm going to show you by going back into the page. This is one last thing. Modify my core results. And let me just get the... So if we take off the defaults and go into, don't get too worried here, we're not going to be too much. This XSL editor file is controlling the display of the core results. Now it is actually possible to do a sort using this settings here, we can actually do a force sort on last name because it's a managed property. And we can actually use that. Anything that's a managed property, we can then use in search customizations. So I can I can force it in, and I've done this. I used to do this on 2007 implementations. But the gotcha is this is a display sort. So the results are presented and then they're supported by the display file. That reason I wanted to call out the maximum number of results means they are sorted per 50 results. Yeah, you can see where this is going. So if you've done your search, if you get 150 results, you could still have Grail on page 3. You won't get sorted alphabetically until you get to page 3. So it's not really a solution. I get hammered a lot as to why I didn't blog this part. And it's partly why, because you've got to get to the point where you can guarantee you're down to 50 results and then display 50 on the page to then sort alphabetically. Quite honestly, you can scan through 50 quickly enough. So it's not a good enough solution to really warrant it is reliable. The harsh reality is you're doing more faffing around with property management through FAST to get what ought to be a very, very basic sort order. The sort order defaults always onto that first name. So that's the gotcha. Just while we're in here, to wrap up on a little bit more positive, the other thing, and I know I wouldn't have time to show you today, is this. You can see, as we're just going up here, we've got our job title field, our department field, our org field. The other thing that you can use this for is if you want to turn the results into more of a business card style result set. Let me just get out of here and into the full page to explain. And again, this is particularly more relevant, if anything, to the older version, 2007, because 2010's gone this direction anyway. The old version was the worst. It really was quite an ugly results page by default. These days, it is more business card oriented, so you get this nice sort of presentation. We can hover over and see what activity this person's been up to. But if, for example, you wanted mobile phone numbers displayed here, that XSL file, that's where you can set it up, and it's the same principle. As long as the mobile phone is a managed property, you can set it in as a variable, and then here I've got my extension, but underneath I could have my mobile phone number displaying. I could have my Twitter ID displaying. Anything that you run as a managed property, you can actually then put in and present on the results page. And it's just another way of getting people to the information without them having to do another click or another click through. So it's actually quite a useful trick. Takes a little bit of fiddling. XSL is not the prettiest to work with, but you can actually pick it up quite easily if you look at the file. You can see the other different properties. I tend to pick department and literally just copy all its settings down and then replace it with the managed property that you want to display in the position that you want to display. So you can customise this without writing what I would call proper code. I dare to dabble in XML, so it's definitely not proper coding in my book, and get even more of a business card result. Okay, I've waffled on and on a fair bit. We're already up to 5 to 5 quite scarily. Hopefully, that's been a little bit useful to you, and from a staff directory search perspective, it's a very different, I'll say it's all about contact details. Most of the sessions will talk to you much more around social media, social connections, and a different way of searching for people. But for hard basics, this is actually quite an easy win for a SharePoint project. Because the one thing I always find with clients when they deploy SharePoint is if they don't have a well-managed directory, it kind of makes that very visible very quickly. People start going, well, that's not my job title. I didn't work in that department anymore. So it wakes people up. It forces a process. Congratulations, those of you that have got a managed, identity management in place. I remember presenting on that sort of topic 10, 12 years ago and still rarely see it in a lot of organisations. But a clean directory, SharePoint visualises it. Because the other thing about the contacts is I was talking to Ollie. Can't remember, don't know their full name. I've been emailing with Ollie. Who's Ollie? It's why I love Facebook because Facebook's helped push people to put pictures into SharePoint. Because who knew? Ollie's a girl, not a boy. Plenty of names go across both genders. If you're about to meet the person, it's kind of nice to know who you're likely to face. And obviously the photos come in with that. And that's equally part of your contact details. To wrap up, just to zip back to the slides, these slides will be in your deck that you get access to. So dare I go full screen? So I've mentioned on the refiners, the 3 settings, importantly, if you want to add them in, the title, friendly sentence, and the property name. That's just an example highlighted so that you can show these. It's really, and I've got some links here for the further reading too. So configuring, which is part of the post that goes around this session, some basics around search setups and the meanings behind some of these properties, because there's a lot of good juice in there. This one, particularly for everyone outside the US, the phonetic search issue and how to fix it. So if you're not aware or you haven't seen whether or not it's working, simple test, try phonetic search if you've got a working environment back at the office. If not, then actually I wouldn't take credit. They found it way before me. That post takes you through to the fixes to get that up and running. But beyond that, hopefully, it's been a useful little snippet to finish the first day on. And unless there's questions, I may actually stop talking for 5 seconds. So thank you. Thank you for listening. Thank you for turning up. I wasn't sure where we'd be versus the My Sites, the funky monkey. If there are no questions, I've got a question back. Does anyone here plan on turning off My Sites, since you're not at the My Site session? Anybody? Yeah, you can do that. It's quite easy, but make sure you remove the links too and disable the site collection. But no, I've got a couple of clients. And I don't blame them either, because more recently, just to give an example for those of you that are wondering, and in one organisation, they've got somebody who's left the organisation who decided to put all their useful stuff in a My Site. And then they suddenly came to IT, who phoned me, and said, oh, this person's left, because SharePoint's syncing to AD, but it's only syncing to live accounts. We don't want all the dead ones. They don't delete anybody, but they just disable them. Well, it's set to not show disabled accounts. So what happens within the SharePoint process is if somebody leaves the organisation, their account is disabled, on sync with SharePoint, it picks that up and flags it for deletion. It will remove the profile, and in 14 days, it will delete the My Site. So if anybody wants to get anything out of that site, they need to do it within a 14-day window, or poof, it's backup and restore time, which is always a pleasant experience for the IT department. So do be aware of that if people are tucking things in My Sites. The request that the client is that we needed to keep that My Site live for the next 6 months. It's like, no, if you need anything on there, it should have been in the team site in the first place. It shouldn't have been tucked away in a private folder somewhere. So they've been ordered to get it out. They have to migrate across because we're letting the site will be deleted. So bear that in mind. I have to admit, yeah, I'm mixed on My Sites. I find often I guide people more into, it's meant to be a collaborative tool. There's not much collaboration going on in a personal My Site. So you've left them active, yeah. I mean, the great thing on the profile side is the profile gets nuked, but every time, once a user's been on SharePoint, a certain amount of that information is synced in a user list. You know, because another client asked me, what happens if somebody leaves and we delete their profile? If you're looking at a document library, who then is the last modifier? You know, who's the last person that modified it? What do you see there? And you still see an active link, but that link goes to a user list, which is just the very basics out of the profile. So it's kept as a constant stub. So the profile can be long deleted, but you've still got the basics. Question? Oh. Yeah, so the comment there, and a very, very good suggestion, is let people have the My Site, but don't let them upload the content. What do they use that My Site for then, though? Oh, so literally newsfeed, social media, yeah, which you can actually, get to without them having that content area. This is it. I should clarify too, because the whole My Site, again, 2007, very clear distinction. Here's your public profile, there's your My Site, of which there is the private area that's only visible to you, and there's the shared area that's visible to everyone else. The terminology is a little bit all over the shop in 2010 because it's kind of, you click on my profile and you'll see along the top my newsfeed, my content, and really what we're talking about is the my content bit, is the old My Site from 2007. But yeah, if you're not sure what to do with it, it's no bad thing to keep it out of the equation, certainly early on in a SharePoint deployment. It's used to replace personal drives, certainly in my experience, and be happy for anyone else to pitch in their conversations. And personal drives are the greatest, biggest dumping ground you'll ever see of most file shares. So you're just moving a problem from one platform over to the other. And I think you need to question what we got them for, what's their purpose.
I just say we've dispatched rollout with using My Sites, but with an absolute minimal, minimal storage.
Yes.
That's
a very, very good example. So the comment there is that rolling out the My Sites but with minimal storage, excellent, excellent approach, because it also allows people a certain amount of working data. Sometimes, particularly in management, HR, those types of functions, they crave that sort of private area. So you still give them that without it becoming a hoard. But at the same time, yes, they can build their own personal links, their own personal portal front end in effect, combined with that newsfeed, which is a very, very good feature in the current version of SharePoint, to give them that personal landing page and start point. That is a great, great way to approach it.
What would you describe as a minimum, you said a minimum data
you really need to think about what's the typical type of documents. So if you were a construction firm or a firm of architects, your minimum might be quite large because those files could be big. But your typical organisation, look at your own usage. Your average, PowerPoint, that PowerPoint will be all of about, 400 kilobits. Those of you that sat in my earlier session, that one's 2.7 megabits with my funky-wonky workflows going through the slides. So, yeah, you do. And obviously, the one thing we're always seeing is that the average file size gets fatter and bigger. As we've come up. So you need to think realistically. If average document size is a meg, would you say 50 megabytes is reasonable or not? If you're a 100,000 user organisation, that's a hell of a lot of storage.
So that's what we're not a big company, and we've taken the opposite approach. We've said, my site's a great place for you to put your content. You don't have to hold up the network trying to know. We've got in the cloud, so we've got a lot of space to give, so everyone gets a gig. And
wow, that's...
They share their documents, they put their own personal content on there, they can distribute those, put your own review documents, share it with the manager, set up, and encourage people to use it. So.
That's a really good perspective, and that's really flipping the concept on the head of how we're collaborating from the individual first and out, rather than funneling people through into the team site collaborative concept. So brilliant example. A gig, how many users? 45,000, so 45,000 gigabytes of storage set aside for personal use. And yet, it sounds like it's working very well. So great, it's a great alternative scenario to consider. And particularly, if you're starting out from this remit, well, we're just going to give all teams a team site without really thinking what they're going to use those team sites for. Apologies, I may have to talk to you at some point because I might abuse you as an example. Because that is the alternate caveat. Take it from the individual's viewpoint rather than tell them they've got all these team sites and then they move teams and, maybe make the My Site the starting point. Obviously, I would treat that in a very different attitude as a platform compared to a My Site that is replacing a personal drive. I think if you can have that philosophy around it of what the purpose is, then thank you for the suggestion. That is an alternative approach to consider. Sorry, we were all listening. Apologies. Any other questions or conversation? Happy to chat away if anyone's got any suggestions, comments. Yeah.
And obviously, if the person approached that on the bank, they get a warning. Request further space if they need to. So we have certain quote templates.
Yeah.
100 meg, 500 meg, depending on. Obviously, some users have those documents PowerPoint presentations. So
Yeah, absolutely.
depends on the user.
It's, again, just to repeat back if anyone couldn't hear that. So deploying it, but with different quota templates. So depending on the user, do you get the smaller quota, the larger quota, the very large quota, which again, very good for managers that do want to do things like manage the review process, because it is an easy scenario. They obviously, it's effectively a My Site is a site, or my content area, it's a site collection. It's a site collection per user. They're the owner of that site collection. They have absolute control. So if you've got that needs, then using the quota templates is another way around. And it's really good to hear the parallels, because a lot of it does depend on the attitude of the organisation. And if I'm honest, I see most organisations aren't really ready. You're a great example as an alternative, because most are, desperately almost trying to wrestle control away from the user and get them into this comfortable sharing environment. But it's the what's in it for me. Yeah, but it's definitely, I see huge problems with team sites. People get team sites and then they splinter them. They break inheritance with permissions. They then forget and they allocate permissions at a lower level that somebody can't access a higher level. And that's one of the worst scenarios. I mean, I know this is not a security session, but just, best practice for security. If you're given permission to, say, contribute lower in a site collection hierarchy, at the very minimum, give them read permission at the top. And if they're not allowed to see at the top, they shouldn't be in at the lower level. Try and at least... Permissions changes through a site hierarchy should be about changing the level of access, not granting access. So I see team sites get into huge messes as well. I don't think there is one ideal scenario between the team site and the My Site. I just see more trouble typically with My Sites, and more nervousness from the organisation that they're going to lose the stuff into hidden areas. So all good stuff. Fantastic. It's great to have the suggestions and feedback too. This is good. Any other insights, comments, questions? Well, you are technically allowed to leave the room. I will not leave until the room is empty. So please do not stay, because I'm just going to keep talking. Thank you very much.